So this week we're on chapter 13 of Is Your God Big Enough, Close Enough, You Enough? We studied this book for 7 weeks in the fall, and now we're completing the book in this time of Lent. So we're drawing close to the end. And the title for today is The Bliss of Transcendent Consciousness. The spiritual journey is all about a journey of discovery that takes place in our own consciousness. So we think of a journey as going from somewhere to someplace else in the distance. But the journey that we're talking about is taking place inside of us. So in that sense, we never really go anywhere. It's all inside of us. And its focus is about becoming clear about our true identity. Author Paul Smith asks the important question today: will the real me please stand up? I'll write that out. We have so many things that we identify with in our lives, don't we, and at different stages in our lives. But we know, hopefully, that we are more than those parts, more than those phases or bits and pieces at different times, more than our personality and one-of-a-kind history that we are so invested in. I was a star athlete in high school or in college, or I was the beauty queen or the prom queen or whatever. We really get hooked into that history, don't we? And it shapes who we think we are. We generally call this identity of ours ego, which helps us to separate our sense of identity from others. And it's important for us to do that as we make our way in life initially, as we build our career, and we form that life. But this ego is the warm-up self. Yeah, it's not the lead act. It's just the warm-up. And we are meant to find a much deeper, truer self along the way in the second part of life. Our egos have had a bad rap in modern times, yet we can think of them as an early developmental stage in our life or spiritual journey. Certainly not bad, certainly not something that we should judge. It's just something that's not fully developed yet. We wouldn't pass judgment on the child that we were in our younger days, hopefully, or when we were a teenager. And neither would we want to stay as that child or teenager. But surely we wouldn't give them the rap that we have given our egos. So perhaps we all need to just apologize to our egos this morning. Say, I'm sorry, you did a good job. You're still doing a good job. I love you. I recognize the part that you're playing. But Smith proposes that there are 4 stages we move through to discovering and embodying our true selves. And stage 1, to discovering the real you, is to become a somebody with a healthy, well-developed sense of self that has good boundaries. You know how to play nicely with others. And in this stage, we develop our personality and we become somebody. In stage 2 of discovering our real self, we become a nobody. And Jesus describes it as follows: you must lose your very self, take up your cross each day, and follow in my steps. If you would save your life, you will lose it. From the Gospel of Luke, chapter 9. From an evolutionary standpoint, this is how we grow. How we always lose a self to find a greater self. If you look at your life, you'll see that that's how it goes. Hopefully, you're always expanding. And we see this modeled all around us in nature, in a seed, in a caterpillar, in a bulb. Notice that Jesus presumes that we have a sense of self to begin with, that we have a sense of being somebody before we can become a nobody. And this usually takes place in the second stage of our lives, when we have grown tired of our somebody identity, and or we have a midlife crisis, and we feel like, is this all there is to my identity? Surely there's more. So that's just a little evolutionary crack in the egg of our identity. That's what a midlife crisis is. Our warm-up self, given to us by God as part of our development and has its function in life, only takes us so far. It was never meant to be the real or true self, and it was never meant to take us all the way on the journey. And in that sense, we are the ones who've put this false expectancy, burden on it, to be something it was never intended to be. The real self, the made in the image of God self, is our divine being us self, which is buried under our warm-up self, just waiting for us to discover it. It's been there the whole time. If we are to ever manifest our deeper true self, we must lose our attachment to our warm-up act, to our ego self. We have a tremendous attachment to it, and we must let go of that attachment. Discovering our true self is not becoming something that we are not. It is becoming something we already always have been, but we're unaware of. It's a realization, which means to make real in the moment, to have real eyes and to be able to see that there's something bigger, deeper within me that I can identify with. Our ego just thought that it was the center of our being, when in actuality it's on the periphery. And mystics from both East and West describe losing the self as emptiness. Emptiness. Which is probably why it isn't such a popular thing to do. Because emptiness connotes sadness or losing something, which is why we resist it. I mean, who in their right minds would want to disappear and become nothing or nobody? That would be like dying. Which is why Jesus says you must die daily to yourself, to this false self, to this opening act, one piece at a time. Like he didn't say you must do it on the Sabbath one time. No, that would be too much for us. But we are given opportunities every day to see our attachment and go, no, not going there, going to let go of that need to do that or think that way. And this is how we let go of everything in consciousness. Letting go of our possessions, our relationships, our dreams, our desires, or at least letting go of identifying with them as being us. Because I don't want to make it sound like we can't have desires and we can't have possessions and relationships. But we realize that all of those things still aren't us. And if we're attached to them, they're blocking the way from us developing a relationship with the deeper self. Ironically, we can become so consumed by letting go or losing ourselves that it can become a project, and then it becomes the spiritual ego is involved. And now we have to let go of letting go. It involves even losing our minds, in the sense that we come to realize that I'm not even my thoughts. They're just things that are arising and falling away. And I'm not even my feelings, for that matter. Or that constant voice that I hear in my head, I'm not even that. Losing our minds of its monkey mind busyness and the inner drama games that it wants us to be all caught up in, the daily soap opera in my head. Losing that takes time, vigilance, and intention. It's something we have to consciously do. Dying to our ego is not about getting rid of it, because we will need it down the road. But we need a slimmed down version of it just to help us to function in the world, not to run our lives and to control everything. So it's about letting go of the devotion that we have to our ego. You know, you think of thou shalt not have false images before me. Well, the image of who we are is really the false image. That's what the first commandment is about. How we are so devoted to its every thought, its every need, every feeling, and I have to react. Like it's the be-all and end-all of everything. And it's about replacing that with devotion to the true self, to the divine self that we discover within us. And the surprise about emptiness that we discover is that emptiness is not emptiness. It's a misnomer, really. Emptying our life and mind of its attachments, let us be filled with more life, a greater sense of identity and fullness and happiness. True emptiness is full of love, of beingness, of light, of peace, of harmony. All of the things that we're trying to achieve through the ego are all available through this deeper self. Emptiness is not nothingness, but paradoxically, it's allness, it's fullness, and it's oneness, as the mystics talk about it. It is, in fact, the deepest core of ourselves, beyond our thoughts, words, and feelings, the level at which there is no sense of separate self or a separate I. We just meld into the oneness of everything, like the physics describes so beautifully for us in our poem. And stage 3 in becoming our real self is when we begin then to embody the divine. Becoming an empty nobody finally gives you room and space in your awareness to embody God, because now there's room. You're not so full of yourself. You can be full of the greater self. And that we embody, what we embody is God being us, the inner God, the third part of our experience of God, to go along with the infinite and the intimate God experience, to use Paul's references. We have the infinite God that is still the infinite God, bigger than this universe, but encapsulating it. We have the intimate God that's all around us. But then we have this inner God that is the infinite God and the intimate God inside of us. And this is the stage of transcendent consciousness, where we have peak experiences. We have these openings. The veil is lifted. And we move gradually deeper and deeper into a knowing of who we are. God comes to us disguised as our deepest selves and disguised as our lives. We keep trying to avoid parts of our lives, judging this good or bad, want to get rid of that, keep that, and yet God is just pouring itself into it all, and we can experience this connection no matter what is on the surface, no matter what the wave is doing. If it's not very pleasant, God can be still experienced there. Most of us start looking for God out there. That's what traditionally has been given to us, the infinite God. Or we find companions who provide us with the intimate experience of God right next to us. You fall in love, and that becomes a portal to the divine. Or perhaps nature. You're able to feel and sense God in nature. And finally, the most astonishing thing for us Westerners is that we find God within us. at the core of our being. That's something that really got lost in mainstream Christianity, whereas the East was all about discovering the inner God. So the more we let go of the warm-up act, the warm-up self, your training bra self, the more the disguise dissolves. The easier it will be for us to experience our deepest self. I feel like I have to use these feminine images just to kind of, let's face it, I'm speaking to mostly women, so this might hit home more. And this is why it's so important to see Jesus as fully God and fully human. Not to put the focus on Jesus, to honor Jesus as, he's up on a pedestal, or to get some theological point correct. It's not about that. Rather, it is to get life and our identity right. Because if we can see this in Jesus, perhaps we can start to see it in ourselves. Because after all, he's meant to be a model for us. To enter into transcendent consciousness, we come to a mystical moment when we say, I am. And I want to draw your attention to that hanging over there. It's rather ethereal. You can see the face of Jesus. And then it says, I am. And it's not followed by any descriptor. This is the stage of big mind, the infinite reality beyond all things, and we discover this in our own space. It's the Moses experience, when God spoke and said, I am that I am. And Moses recognized that the that was in him. The God voice, what voice spoke? His voice. It's the first person. I am that I am. You might as well say, I am you, except now you're making the distinction between one and another. God was speaking in Moses' mind, saying, I am the divine. And I'm sure he repeated it. It's the I am that we all share. It is my unique I am in that no other person can say that for me, as I say it. It is one with all other unique selves, but it's not the same as any other self. When I say I am without adding any what to it, I am affirming my own divine center that is infinite being itself, the presence of God in me and as me. And when you do it, you're doing the same thing. And so we all overlap then together in that place of the I amness being present. And so we have the infinite being both inner, and there's an intimacy that comes with it. You can feel this. So if you want to talk about a Trinity, it's all there. It's all inside of us. This infinite God being inner and having a presence that I can feel, I can be at home with. Intimacy. And I am is most deeply and authentically my God being me self. When I'm in that place and I'm saying I am, and I'm knowing that I am the divine, that's when I'm being most authentic and true to myself. To not bring forth that knowing of our real identity in this life is to miss the mark completely. It is to waste our lives. Not bringing forth our God being me self will leave us feeling empty and alone. We'll be like the walking dead, a ghost, a corpse, a shadow, an empty shell. The Gospel of St. Thomas says, if you don't bring forth that which is within you, it will kill you. If you bring forth that which is within you, it will bring you to life. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Yeah. Because we can feel the truth of that, how empty our lives are when we don't have that connection to what's inside us. And this level of awakened consciousness gradually reveals its secrets to us. It shares its essence with us, and we start to know ourselves as light, peace, harmony, expansion, beauty, love. All of those qualities are wrapped up in it. And at this causal level of reality, we start to feel a great love for ourselves, for others, for everything. To use an old phrase, we feel that the veil is being lifted and the scales fall from our eyes. And now, I once was blind, but now I see. Oh, this is what Jesus was talking about, or Buddha, or whoever. Ken Wilber calls this the simple feeling of being, beingness. And it overrides any additional feeling or response that we might want to have. And so we let go of our attachments to these negative reactions and simply rest in this peaceful feeling of just being. We are then able to view life from a place of tranquility and peace. It just requires that we drop into and rest in this place of peace and quiet at the level of our souls. And we have to give ourselves time each day to do that. That's also part of picking up the cross, of making the time and the energy and the effort to do this. But one of the beautiful things about this center of awareness is that it's creative. It sources our perceptions and our intentions. It is what is also called a causal level of consciousness or awareness. It causes things. Quantum science affirms the primacy of inner conscious awareness as a causal force that creates our reality. They're now saying that the physical is not the cause. There is something within all of the physical that's causing the physical. Put simply, consciousness is the source of creation. And that is unity's enduring message summed up in the principle, thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. And we often think of that in terms of perhaps the ego mind. Oh, if I just hold on to this thought. But think of it this way. Think of it in terms of the transcendent mind that is within you. Not just the small human ego mind. And the more we are aware of that, of its beauty, its peacefulness, its harmony and expansion, that's going to be a creative force in our lives then. And the more we are aware of it, the more we are aware of the possibilities every day and of our ability to consciously participate in the evolution of creation. To be the drivers of evolutionary consciousness. Like Barbara Max Hubbard. She wasn't just sitting back. Let's see where it takes me. She was stepping in saying, okay, I am creating from this I am presence. What does the I am presence want? And Kent Wilber claims that there are 4 stages of evolution in consciousness, starting with egocentric, ethnocentric, world-centric, in which humanity has been dipping its toe for the past 50 years or so. And we are supposedly now on the cusp of moving into cosmic-centric consciousness. But it's clear that many want to fight and to hold on to the egocentric and the ethnocentric out of fear. In certain parts of the world, some countries are still stuck in egocentric. They still haven't even got out of that. Others are stuck in ethnocentric viewpoints. And in the developed world that has been evolving to a world-centric consciousness, we can see that there's a backlash going on, which is seen in the rise of nationalism and of xenophobia. Brexit is a very clear example of the clash between ethnocentric and world-centric awareness. Britain has been in this world-centric, like everybody else. Let's be part of a bigger group in Europe. And now we see this pulling back. No, we're the British. We don't need anybody else. That's the ethnocentric consciousness rising up saying, I don't want to go there. The move to integral and cosmocentric culture and spirituality is not going to happen without effort and without vigilance. I don't want to use the word fight. We need to use some other terminology. So we need to be consciously aware of what's going on and reject the egocentric and the ethnocentric and realize, this is the world-centric. This is where spirit is asking us to move forward so that we can get to the cosmocentric. And that has to be clear for all of us. Are we going to be an inclusive or exclusive humanity? That's what it boils down to. Am I willing to be one with everyone and everything? Or am I going to just carve out special pieces of it? And that's the bigger question that is knocking on all of our doors, individually, in our communities, and in our nations. And if we stay in our ego minds, we know what the answer to all of those questions will be. The only hope for humanity, for all of its problems, for climate change, for immigration, is going to come from the deepest level of our consciousness and the deepest level of our souls. From the level of oneness consciousness, which is cosmic consciousness. How do we achieve this? We achieve it through meditation. We sit in meditation. We take the little child of our ego off to school. We must learn to die to our illusions about being dualistically other than God. We are all God. Stop denying it. However it's showing up. Whether it even doesn't look like it deserves to be called God. It is God. But we must also die to any grandiose delusions that we are God in the old-fashioned sense of things. We're not the white, privileged God sitting on his throne. In meditation, we learn to wait with compassion and patience until we are ready to take our next faltering step into a deeper realization of oneness with God. This is a very tender and beautiful point of encounter with what we call the Christ. Understood as the presence of God in everything in our midst. And we listen, we learn how to love, and that presence helps us to see that we are all the children of the Creator and brings us into oneness together. There's a beautiful short paragraph I'm going to end with from the book. Paul Smith says, "When we surrender the busyness of our own mind and enter into that serene spaciousness which is devoid of content, we become aware of the simple feeling of being. This is what I have called the inner face of God. It is the concept of the infinite face of God, now experienced deep within us beyond our mind as pure infinite consciousness and being itself." So I'm asking us to really make the effort for the sake of humanity and for the sake of the planet to be willing to expand our consciousness through the world consciousness to the cosmic consciousness. So as we do each week, I invite us to end with our threefold prayer. Infinite God, in whom I live and move and have my being.
Infinite God, in whom I live and move and have my being.
Infinite God, in whom we live, move, and have our being.
Infinite God, in whom we live, move, and have our being.
Intimate God, you are always with us.
Infinite God, you are always with us.
Inner God, being me, I am the light of the world. Inner God, being me, I am the light of the world. Inner God, being us, we are the light of the world.